afternoon, everyone. I'm Barbara Ham-Lee. Let me ask you a question. Is listening to jazz intimidating? Would you like to know more about jazz artists, techniques, and history? Do you lose purist points if occasionally you like to listen to smooth jazz? On this pledge edition of Another View, a real treat for newbie and seasoned jazz aficionados alike, Jazz 101 with our very own Jae Sinnett. But before we get started, I want to personally ask you for your support of Another View. This is the last day of our fall membership drive, and if you love WHRV and Another View, please make your pledge of support by dialing 889-9476. Let's go to Pledge Central now to see how we're doing. I think Dan Cawley and Sandra Woodward are there.
We're
Hi.
here, Barbara. How are you?
How you guys doing?
I'm just like, oh my God, is like Jae Sinnett right there with you?
Jae Sinnett is sitting right here with me. You'll hear from him in just a little bit.
My goodness, Jae Sinnett is in the house.
Jae Sinnett is in the house, and we're going to have a great time. But right now, we need some folks to make some calls because I heard that we have a $1,500 challenge. Is that right?
You heard correctly, Barbara. We do have a $1,500 challenge. This is just for the Another View.
And we know Barbara loves a challenge.
Yes, Barbara does.
Barbara loves a challenge. So get on the phones right now and challenge Barbara on the challenge. 889-9476.
Or WHRV.org. You can point, click, and pledge. You know, there's so many reasons to make that pledge of support right now. Of course, Another View, Barbara Ham-Lee, Jae Sinnett. It's Pet Pledge Friday. It's the final hours of our fall membership drive.
That was a ping right there?
It's a beautiful day. There are just so many reasons to make that pledge. So wait no longer. Right now, take advantage of this dollar-for-dollar match.
And all that jazz.
Jazz hands.
Yes, jazz
indeed.
Hands.
Y'all are killing me.
Yeah.
$1,500 match is what we have right now. So if you call in now with that pledge of support, it will be matched up to $1,500. Dollar-for-dollar match happening right now. 889-9476, 757-889-9476, or WHRV.org. If you love it, support it.
There's another call. Thank you. Come on. Let's turn $1,500 into $3,000 with your phone call. Thank you for that call. Get on the phone. 889-9476. Feel the energy and all that jazz. Jae Sinnett's going to talk to you in just a minute about making jazz approachable, which I think is a great subject.
It is a great subject. I mean, and he's really good at it. If you've ever attended any of Jae's seminars that he's had here at the station, they're
jazz is not a four-letter word.
It's not.
No.
That's right.
And when people really get a chance to dig in and dive in, that's one of the things I love about the stations. Is that you can understand the music, you can talk about the music, you can explore music that maybe you wouldn't have before. And Jay's a great person to bring that to us, so I'm looking forward to that conversation.
It's going to be a great hour, made possible
challenge.
by members, people who support what they love. 889-9476 is how you can support the great programming, such as Another View here on WHRV. 889-9476, dollar-for-dollar match happening right now. WHRV.org. That counts too. You can ping your way in here and get that dollar-for-dollar match. Whatever works for you works for us and keeps the great programming going here 24/7 on WHRV. It's been a great day so far. We are wrapping this thing up here in mere hours. We've raised so far today.
How much?
$41,118, which is
that's not bad.
Pretty phenomenal.
That's not bad. We can do better.
Wow, you're
we can
you're
do
a tough
better.
Cookie there,
I just
Dan.
got here. I'm fresh.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you for that call. We've got 3 more volunteers on the phones waiting to take your call for Barbara's challenge. We need to raise $1,500 right now so we can match that $1,500. So get on the phone. 889-9476, 1-800-940-7170. Tell us about your dog. Tell us about your cat. Tell us about your others.
Yeah, the others have been really taking over. Well, not quite. The dogs are still winning, but the others, the others. There are 131 of them. So,
and what kind of others have we had today? Do we know?
We do.
Some chickens?
Oh, did you want me to tell you?
Some chickens?
Chickens, iguanas, rabbits.
A bear?
A bear.
We had a bear today? Oh, that's
did.
great.
We did. 889-9476. Come in for the dogs, for the cats, for the others, whatever works for you.
Bare your soul to us.
889-9476.
I got to keep up with
Or
Ray.
WHRV. You are fresh.
Thank you.
WHRV.org is the website where you can point, click, and pledge. A little red button on the corner that says Give Now or something like that. Anyway, that's where you go to make that ping of support.
And I am a volunteer. I'm proud to be a member
and
of
generally
WHRV.
Nice guy as well.
Thank you very much for reading that the way I wrote it. Thank you for that call, too. We still have 2 more phones phones available, and then when someone hangs up, get on the phones, 889-9476. I'm inviting you to join me as a member in support of public radio. And I know, this is how the station pays attention to what we care about. This is your chance to support the programs that you care about and help them pay for the programs that you depend on throughout the week. And this noon hour on Fridays is one of the best of the bunch. So get on the phone.
It's the best.
It's the best of the bunch.
Friday noon program.
Get on
anywhere.
the phones, even during the call, and get on the phones and help us.
Did I read that right,
challenge.
Barbara? I read the script right?
Yes, absolutely.
Absolutely,
your handwriting's
you did.
a little difficult to read sometimes, Barbara.
889-9476. You're going to want to listen to what Jay has to say coming up in this hour. So please make that call right now. Get it done. 757-889-9476 or WHRV.org. Support what you love. We're wrapping it up, folks. Let us hear from you.
Discussing today's topics from an African American perspective, this is Another View.
Good afternoon, everyone. Happy Friday, and welcome to Another View. I'm Barbara Ham-Lee. Now, this is the last day of our fall membership drive, and we're celebrating the 25th anniversary of WHRV-FM, bringing you classical music 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and WHRV-FM, bringing you news, public affairs, programming, and music. And we're also celebrating the 5th anniversary of Another View. Thanks to your support, we've been able to hang out with you on Fridays at noon for the past 5 years and counting. But we need your support to continue this show and all of the shows on WHRV and WHRO. So please, if you haven't had a chance to make your pledge, please do so now by calling 889-9476 or going to WHRV.org and point, click, and contribute. And if you call right now, you will help us raise the $1,500 we need to match an anonymous gift we received. So thank you so very much. And I just love Pledge Fridays because we always get a chance to have a fun show, and today is no different. We're going to take you to school. The class is Jae Sinnett's Jazz 101. Hey, Jay.
Hey, Barbara.
How are you?
I'm groovy.
Groovy.
Groovy. Not uptight, but out of sight.
Out of sight. There you go. Okay, so which genre was that from?
That was a cross genre there. That just went across the board there. Yeah.
But I am curious as to why are there so many different genres of jazz? I looked up and checked out Wikipedia. There are 47 different types of jazz listed on this
saw
one
that
list.
on Wikipedia.
Yeah, Wikipedia. That's what I saw it on. But some of them I know are real, like acid jazz and crossover jazz and Dixieland and, so forth and so on. So,
well, I great art moves forward. So things progress. And then there are artists that aren't interested in repeating history. So I've seen situations where artists are playing the same thing from a theoretical perspective, but actually calling it something different. So they don't want to be connected to that history. So they don't want to be accused of repeating that history. And, because there are thin lines, for example, between bop and post-bop, right?
okay.
Art Blakey and the Jazz Messengers is considered to be post-bop. Horace Silver, Clifford Brown, bebop, Dizzy Gillespie, Charlie Parker, those guys. But then you have something distinctly different from that, the avant-garde with Ornette Coleman and Cecil Taylor and some of those artists. And then you had the modal period with Miles Davis. But most of, particularly in that from the 20s through the beginning of the early 60s, with the exception of fusion, which coming out of the 60s, you had legit and valid conceptual changes in the music that justified new titles, calling it something else. I don't know if that makes any sense,
Yes,
but
yeah.
but after that, then when the electronica thing came into the play, the sequencing, the sampling, the looping, people started incorporating all these things. Hip hop artists started using jazz sampling. So it all of a sudden the whole thing can become confusing. It's kind of like dance music. The electronica. They have all these different names for this stuff, and I'm thinking, man, I can't hear the difference in a lot of this stuff.
So what is the basic definition of jazz? What makes it jazz?
Well, I don't look at it as one specific definition, Barbara, because it's kind of hard to put that into play.
Okay.
The way I look at it, there are a series of there are things that make jazz unique. Like jazz is really the only music that is swung collectively, where the eighth note in music, if you understand music notation, if you look at the eighth note in classical music, the eighth note in rock and roll, the eighth note in jazz, and so forth, it has the same note value.
Okay.
The same note,
Okay.
it's just basic math.
Mm-hmm.
But how they're phrased and how they're played is different. And that's what separates jazz from from those genres. Because, and here's a quick rhythmic example. So if that's the quarter note, basic 1, 2, 3, 4, math, the eighth note would be half that. So it'd be 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, right?
Gotcha.
So that's a straight eighth note, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. The swinging eighth note in jazz is felt. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1
got a rhythm
and 2.
to it.
It has that triplet, triplet, triplet. So you say triplet, but you open up the syllables. Triplet, triplet, triplet. Straight.
Gotcha.
1 and 2 and 3 and swung. 1 and 2 and 3. But if you see it on paper, on music notation, on manuscript paper, it's the value of the note from a math perspective. The duration of is the same.
Mm-hmm. So when some
that was one example of how you separate
Gotcha.
what defines jazz.
But some jazz that you can listen to, and it makes you. This is my own personal thing. It makes you nervous. I mean, it's kind of in your face, and it sounds disjointed, and it sounds like a lot of things coming together at once, but not necessarily harmonically. And there are other jazz where you can just sit and you can, pop your fingers to the beat, or you can just really. It's more of a soulful kind of thing.
I'm with you here.
You understand what I'm saying? So why is that, and how do you keep that from being intimidating to someone who may be new to jazz?
Let's go back before that, though. There are 3 elements that make music.
Okay.
That's melody, harmony, and rhythm.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. In any kind of music. Those are the 3 elements: melody, harmony, and music. Clearly, there's an infinite way of organizing those 3 elements to create something, right? Mm-hmm. So in jazz, the kind of, getting to your point, improvisation is a big part of jazz. So you have the melody that's played, and then after the melody, then we have what we call improvisation, or the solos. Mm-hmm. Okay? This is where people usually get a little lost.
And a little stuck.
Right. Because they no longer hear the melody. And then they get lost in the form of the song. The form is a specific number of bars or measures. Yeah, and it's usually even numbers, but it doesn't have to be. Like the verse section, and then another verse, and then there's a chorus or bridge, and then there's the last verse. So the sections are A, A, B, A. That's traditional song form. Usually 8 bars or 16 bars. It's usually even number bars. Standard song form is 32 bars. So when it gets into the improvisation, things start to sound, to the untrained ear or the new ear, to jazz, it kind of sounds disjointed a little bit because they no longer hear the melody. They hear all this stuff. And then you have the drummer doing what they're doing.
Do.
Then the bass player's doing what they do. Mm-hmm. Then the piano player, guitar player doing what they're doing. So what you're referring to, and then the rhythm of jazz is the second area where people have the problem with, because it's very syncopated. Now that's a word that came into play. Syncopated would be, in early jazz, it was dance music.
So people actually danced to
but
jazz
the rhythm
music.
was real repetitive.
Okay.
You need repetition for dance music. 1, dun, 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 dun. It was just straight up, just a straight pulse, straight 4/4 pulse, right? Mm-hmm. Then syncopation started happening, specifically coming into bebop. Now, when bebop came into play, jazz was no longer a dance music. It was shifting and becoming a listening music, because now you had rhythms done, instead of that straight or slower. Now you had.
Can't dance to that.
And then
but you
people
can't
would
listen to it.
no, but hear me out with this, Barbie, because now all of a sudden people are getting caught up to all those shifting, syncopated beats, but underneath that, you still have that. Mm-hmm. But all of a sudden, but underneath, that's still happening. But people couldn't feel that underneath repetitive pulse, that time. And so consequently, it made it more difficult for people to dance. But I truly believe artists like Dizzy Gillespie and Charlie Parker and Thelonious Monk, they saw the white audiences going to the concert halls, sitting and listening to these orchestral musicians play. The black community, it was the Saturday night throwdown and the Sunday morning church service. It was dancing, man. So the black community wasn't used to in that social time. They weren't used to, like, first of all, a lot of the societal mechanisms prohibited many of the black people from going into these
into the jazz clubs.
No, not the jazz clubs. The concert halls.
Oh, concert halls. Yes.
So they weren't used to sitting and listening to musicians perform. They were used to dancing, going to places where they could dance. Now jazz is becoming a listening music. And Ellis Marsalis said something very, very interesting to me, in that when this shift was happening in bebop, that was the beginning of the detachment of the black community from jazz, because now jazz was becoming a sit-down listening music. And a lot of the hardcore jazz artists, the more traditional jazz artists like Louis Armstrong and Coleman Hawkins, and initially they didn't like that transition.
That kind of transition. You know what? Let's listen to some bebop. Let's listen to Confirmation by Charlie Parker, since you were talking about that genre. So I can hear that bass line, though.
But you can that's what we call a walking bass line. Boom, 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 right? That. But you also hear that that syncopation, that anticipation in the beats. And that's when the music started to change.
Started to change right there. Let me throw the phone numbers out. If you'd like to call and join our conversation, 440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240 are the numbers to call to join the show, to talk to Jay about Jay and Jazz. 440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240. So that's when things started to change. You had the dance, not so much dancing, more listening.
More listening.
Okay, so where did it go at that point? What was the trajectory?
It was really at that point too, where the music started to become more of an art music. It was really becoming, it was played more above the neck, more heady, and because before that it was pretty much standard bass, blues bass. So there were a lot of more elements, harmonic elements being introduced to the music. Certainly, European music is based off of harmony and melody. American music is based off rhythm. And then American music started to pull in a lot of the European harmonic elements, to merge. And jazz really became progressive. It really became more of an art music. It became more of a composed music. More people were writing and arranging jazz.
So, and that brings up a good point. So if you're writing and arranging jazz, are you doing it just up to the point where the improvisation happens? Because I can't imagine that you can write improvisation on a piece of paper.
I think it was Stravinsky that said that composition was thought out improvisation. But, the jazz musicians, we always leave room in the composition for improvisation, because that's the foundation of the music, along with the blues, along with being able to swing and make the music feel good. But I think it goes back to your initial question about why is it so, frantic sounding to a lot of people. And really it's because people get caught up into all the peripheral things happening above the foundation pulse. Saxophone's playing a solo, underneath that, if people learn to understand form and understand collective improvisation, because we have something we call comping. So when someone's playing a solo, right, if the saxophone, for example, is playing a solo, we don't just play straight behind that soloist. It's a dialogue. It's a bit of interactive communication, instrumentally speaking.
Okay, let's go to Daniel in Hampton. Hi, Daniel. You're on the air.
Hi. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about, to personalize jazz, a little bit about Quincy Jones, who did the Sanford and Son theme, and how jazz was supposedly a combination of blues and classical from the Creole, the kind of classical being the Creole community, the mixed race people combining with who are classically trained, combining with the more rough like blues community.
Well,
performing jazz.
Okay, Daniel, thanks for your call.
Initially, there wasn't that merging of blues and classical. Blues evolved out of hymns and spirituals,
right?
And it's like it goes back to slavery. When slaves were brought here to this country, they weren't speaking the language. They spoke their own language. They had their own drum concepts and things like that. But in learning the language that we speak, English, learning the English language, there were phrases that came out of that transition that that's so connected to gospel music, in the black church, and so connected to blues. That had nothing to do with classical music.
Right.
The classical element is, you talked about a couple of different things there. Quincy Jones, not sure the connection, but in New Orleans, for example, where a lot of people say jazz really started, I'm not one that totally agrees with that, because there were things happening in Chicago, there were things happening in Kansas City, Jay McShann, for example, where Charlie Parker had his huge connection, that things that weren't connected to New Orleans. But the rivers, those boats, brought a lot of people out of New Orleans, and brought them up north and spread out to west. And so the classical thing and jazz came, a little bit later, and those were more what we call the societal gigs, like Paul Whiteman with the Paul Whiteman Orchestra, for example. They were using more of the European elements in the music, but really wasn't little of that was connected to the blues.
Okay, let's if you are brand new to jazz, or you decided, I'm going to really try this out again, let's listen to Stolen Moments by Oliver Nelson. You said that's a good song for new listeners to jazz. We'll talk about it on the other side. Playing, Victor, but bring it down just a little bit. Jay, talk to us about what we're listening to here.
The reason why I would recommend the album's called The Blues and the Abstract Truth by Oliver Nelson. I would recommend this record to new jazz listeners. For one, it's not rhythmically, overly busy. It's a pretty straightforward kind of thing. It's more of a blues, hence the title, more of a minor blues record. But you have all-star jazz artists on here, like Eric Dolphy and trumpeter Freddie Hubbard and pianist Bill Evans and drummer Roy Haynes and bassist Paul Chambers. I mean, you don't get any better than that. So you have so the level of improvisation is at a high level, but there's not a lot of busyness underneath that. So it has kind of a very comfortable feel in the rhythm when you're listening to this record, and you hear there's melody.
It automatically makes you bop your head too.
Mm-hmm. It swings. It has a good bounce to it, and that's what swing is. You have to feel that, but it has nice melodic continuity. But there's also arranging, so the ear can get conditioned to hearing 3, 4, 5 notes played at the same time in an organized. That's composed. That part of it is composed.
Okay.
And then you have the improvisation. So people they feel swing when they listen to this record. They can feel the blues. They hear melody that they can hum along to. You hear harmony, which is in the arrangements. You hear composition, composed parts, and then you hear high-level improvisation. Then you have the marquee value of the names. You have the jazz stars on the record. So it's a wonderful record to come in, sit down, and expose yourself to jazz. But I always tell people try to listen to music sometimes, specifically jazz, and they're trying to intellectualize it, figure out what's going on. I say, don't worry about it. It's not important that you understand. Just feel it. Because that's the whole point of why we listen to music in the first place, is how it makes you feel.
Absolutely. Bring it back up, Victor. Let's listen to some more. Okay.
But you hear there's enough repetition in the rhythm, and Roy's playing brushes on that as well. So there's not a lot of stick action, so there's not a lot of bashing or anything like that. It's a comfortable record to listen to. And you hear all the important, significant elements of jazz that makes it what it is in this record.
That really sounds good. Now, see, you're a percussionist, so when you're playing drums and you're performing, your role to keep the rhythm?
The role of drummer, I always tell my students that you have three roles. The drummers control the time, obviously, but the drummers, you can't be the only one in the band with good time. So everybody has to have good time. But the drummer, most of the band, or at least they should be, following the time of the drummer. The drummer also controls the dynamic range, the highs and the lows, the volumes and the highs and the softs and stuff like that. The drummer also controls the energy level of the band. And a lot of times there are battles that take place on stage. You get these little musical wrestling matches where somebody over here, the piano player or the guitar player, might be playing low energy, and the song is not moving forward. So the drummer might have to
pick it up
put that foot down a little bit, So that's the three basic elements.
Here's a question I've always wondered too, because I love going and watching a jazz performance. But in your trio, for example, how do you all know when you're ready to come out of your improv back to the song? And back to the melody of the song. In other words, do you guys give yourselves a signal that we don't see, or is it just a feel kind of thing?
It's both. You
don't throw your hand up and say, we're going back.
Well, this brings up the T word, trust. That's the number one word. Most important thing for me when I'm with the guys I'm playing with. You have to trust each other. And in the case of my trio, either with Alan Farnham or Justin Coughlin playing piano, both of which have played with me for many, many, many years. Justin's blind, of course, so it's like he can't see our signals if I was like going to give a cue. So I would play a very distinctive thing that he would recognize. Like if we're playing a solo, and we play through the form. Let's say you want to play 3 times through the form. If we're playing and the energy's up, and then we're coming into the last verse section, the last 8 bars. I'm playing. Then I start getting soft. So that kind of cues. It's going to resolve the section, so he needs to come out of the solo.
Okay.
But other times, there's a visual thing. A head nod, or if we're in more controlled environments, like on TV or something where time is of the essence, we'll say, okay, we're only going to play one chorus. So everybody knows that.
So everybody knows that going ahead. So that makes it also a little bit easier, or is it a little bit easier when you have to join in with another group or another group of musicians to play?
You talk it out, and you make sure everybody's on the same page. And the bottom line, though, Barbara, I would rather work with musicians that have understanding of how to make music feel good. They may not be as harmonically deep.
Right.
I would rather have that than somebody who's really harmonically interesting and deep and heavy, but can't swing.
Can't swing at all. Okay, we're getting ready to go back to Pledge Central to find out how we're doing. We had that $1,500 challenge.
Come on, folks,
and
call.
so we're hoping that everybody has called in. Sandra and
Yes.
Dan, how we doing?
We're doing well. I was told by the people in charge. We're swinging. Thank you. We're told by the people who are in charge of these things that we're close, but we do have that $1,500 challenge, a dollar for dollar match happening right now. 889-9476 is the number to call to get in on that dollar for dollar match and support the great programming you're listening to at this very moment on Another View. Jae Sinnett in the house.
We need Jae
Sinnett
Sinnett in the
here.
house, and we know.
Oh my God!
Actually, I love the getting this behind the scenes insights into what's going on the
pretty
stage.
exciting.
I just think that's really interesting. But you know what I really think is harmonically deep? The phones.
Exactly,
Give
I agree.
Us a call, 889-9476. That is harmonically deep.
The cacophonous sounds of ringing telephones is what we need to hear right now, folks.
Sweet, thank
Call
you.
us, 889-9476. And if you ask yourself why you should make that contribution,
Why should I make that contribution?
Jay, why should we?
Because you're listening. You're using the service. That's the number one reason why you should make that call. 889-9476. And we're in the home stretch, folks. We need to wrap this show up. Barbara, let's take this show. Let's meet this match.
Thank you for that call.
It's a matching challenge. You don't get the money unless you reach the $1,500.
Right.
It takes a few moments of your time, a few moments of your hard-earned, or a little bit of your hard-earned dollars to call in and support this program, folks. If you're listening right now, that's why you call. 889-9476 if you're outside of the local calling area. 800-940-7170, or you can pledge online at WHRV.org. I know this message, folks. I know this deal. Call.
I know, and I know Jay is one of the best fundraisers that we have in the building, so I knew that this would be great. I also want to encourage our Another View listeners, if you would like to become a sustainer, that means that you give us, you pick the amount you'd like to give each month, and we'll take it from your credit card or from your checking account, and you become a member, and it's a gift that keeps on giving. And so we would appreciate those of you who are able to become sustainers. Please do so. 889-9476 or 1-800-940-7170. Isn't that right, Sandra?
Well, yeah, I was thinking about what Jay was talking about before you came to us about this whole
Thank
idea
you.
of trust on stage and the whole model of public radio. Relies quite a bit on trust. You know, we bring you this great programs, we pay for it, and we trust that when we come to you during these fun little pledge drives that you will make that call. So there's a good bit of trust in this model of keeping two great public radio stations alive and thriving here for the last 25 years. So if you love it, support it, and we know you love Another View. You actually own a little piece of it when you are a member of WHRV. 889-9476, 757-889-9476, WHRV. If you're there right now anyway, if you're streaming that, you're right there at WHRV.org. There's a little button up in the right-hand corner.
Sandra.
Yes?
I was talking last night on my show. There are way more people that listen that aren't members than there are people that listen that are. So the sustainer thing has changed the dynamic of on-air pledging, because now a lot of people don't call in live because their money is being deducted from their credit cards.
Right.
So, but
New members
that's why I said that there's a lot more people out there that we can tap into that should become members. We hope that you would. And I always say make the transition from the passive listener to the active supporter. We are closing in on this $1,500 challenge. We don't get the money unless we match the challenge. It's a matching grat fund. Not sure who put it up, but thank you. Let's wrap this show up successfully. We're going to raise at least, the minimum goal is $3,000, but we need to get up to $4,000 before we wrap up the show. 889-9476.
See, guys, I made your job easier, didn't I?
Well, when I heard Jay was here, I knew. I just knew. 889-9476. We are trying to match dollar for dollar up to $1,500, and we know you want to hear what Jay has to say here coming up. So another minute or so, we'll take you back to what it is that you're paying for. Great program, great conversations, great information, great insight, and it's all right here in one radio show, Another View, here on WHRV. 889-9476 is how you can support it. 889-9476 WHRV.
Thank you for that call.
We're swinging, Dan.
And absolutely. And, I got to tell you, as a member, as a volunteer, when you are a member, you feel differently when you listen. You really do. It makes a difference. So experience that. Give us a call, 889-9476 or point, click, and pledge, WHRO.org. Be a member and feel how much different you can be.
And Dan, Sandra, Barbara, there are organizations like the Virginia Arts Festival that support us, that underwrite programming constantly with their events. They have a great concert tomorrow night with bassist and vocalist Katie Thoreau. Will be playing with her. John Toomey will be playing with her at the Addicts Jazz Club series. Great, and it's an accessible jazz program, folks. Come on down, support it. You can pay, get your ticket at the door. The Addicts Jazz Club series. Great bass player vocalist Katie Thoreau will be in concert tomorrow night at the Addicts Theater. And these phone calls are coming in right now. We're talking about swinging. That's the best rhythmic pulse for us to hear right now and feel. Call us, folks, 889-9476.
Thank you, Sandra and
we'll
Dan, and we'll talk to
back to you
in just a little bit. Absolutely. So, Jay, let's talk about smooth jazz. Don't hit me. You and I have had many conversations, though, about smooth jazz. So, for the audience first, what makes smooth jazz versus jazz? And then we're going to play some music to talk about kind of bridging the gap.
Okay. Music, Barbara, is played, in my opinion, for two reasons: for commerce, to sell a record, or art, where you're not concerned about selling a record, you're concerned more about creating. Smooth jazz is a coined term, for one, and for those people who don't know where that term came from, there was a Chicago radio station, and there was a lady working there who's not a jazz musician, not a jazz educator, nothing to do with jazz, right? Heard something and blurted out, "Man, this is smooth. This sounds like smooth jazz." And it stuck, and it became this coined term. I kid you not. That's how it started. But then it became like this sound model. You know, it's a very distinctive, very specific way that this music is presented. And since Clear Channel owns 90% of the commercial radio stations, they own the smooth jazz stations when it was at its peak. Many of those stations have shut down, but you didn't get on those formats unless you played in that very, very repetitive, keyboard-driven kind of sound. And it was done to keep the ratings up on those commercial formats, because you had to, the deal with commercial ratings.
Yep.
And it was designed to sell records. It was designed to have a repetitive beat so people can dance. It was designed to have minimal improvisation, because that would, in their eyes, lose people. They couldn't. So everything, it's kind of the pop music formula. You have to have the hooks. You have to have the simplicity. All these things, the songs can't be too long, everything designed just like pop music. That's the complete antithesis of what jazz represents. Jazz is not concerned about people dancing, to the beat,
rhythm,
right? Or selling the records, or worried about if people can't understand your solo.
So if you are a type of person who enjoys smooth jazz, but you were also thinking about making more of a swing towards jazz, let's listen to let's
Jackets.
See, I was just going to say that March Majestic by the Yellow Jackets, who I happen to love, by the way. But
I'll tell you why. You want me to talk about this before or after?
You can talk about it now.
Well, I picked the Yellow Jackets, Barbara, because they bridged that gap between, they have enough repetition in their music so you can feel that beat, if people are looking for that and want and like that, and they have melody, but they have a jazz harmonic sensibility. You hear very sophisticated harmony in this band, and you still have a very high level of improvisation. So they're the perfect band for bridging that contemporary, smoothish kind of vibe. I wouldn't call them a smooth jazz band, though, not by any stretch.
But they are a jazz band.
But they're not a far stretch from a smooth audience appreciating them. They're the perfect band, in my opinion, that if somebody's looking to cross from smooth over into jazz, really listen to this band, because that they will ease you into straight up jazz.
Okay, let's listen, Victor. I see what you mean.
See what I mean?
Yeah.
They have a very sophisticated, they have their own groove concept in the band. They have their own harmonic presentation. They're very melodic, beautiful melodies in their songs. So, but there's nothing that's really aggressive. You know what I mean? So people aren't going to be like intimidated.
They're not going to get that intimidation, that frantic feel.
But it's so if you like smooth jazz, I would, and you might be curious, but you have to want to, Barbara. This is the beginning of liking something. You have to be curious about it, and that's what's missing, unfortunately, in a lot of art in this country today. The desire, the curiosity factor is not there as it used to be in our generation.
You know, when I go to jazz concerts now, I rarely see, or I don't think I've ever been to a jazz concert where there have been more people of color than not. Where are we in terms of going to jazz concerts now?
Well, I mean, it goes back to what I was saying before about that separation. This is where it began. When bebop shifted the music and jazz became a listening music, the black community, that's where it started to separate itself from the black community. And this is why in a smooth jazz concert, you see an 85 to 90% black audience.
Absolutely.
Because it's more beat, repetitive driven, and easy to dance and, you know, get up and move and all this kind of stuff. But, you know, that's where that separation been, and it's decades old, and it hasn't corrected itself.
So it's a matter of re-education.
It is,
again,
but it starts with wanting it. You have to be curious enough about it to investigate it. You know, people don't think, they hear music and they make a quick decision. You know, well, I don't like that, or I like that. You know, I don't like that, or I like that, and then there's not a second thought put into it. So people have to have that curiosity factor back. I mean, in our generation, when we were kids, we used to have listening sessions with our friends.
Yes, you sure did.
Remember the 45 record and that little spindle thing
you had to put in the middle?
I remember we didn't have those, and we tried to put the 45 on there.
Exactly
and
right.
The record would get out of loop. But we would sit for hours and just listen to these musicians play. We would read the liner notes on the album. See, things were... You know, I don't think we'll ever see another time like that. And so for people to want to get into jazz, you have to give it a shot. You have to be patient. You can't react to what you don't understand. Right. You just have to ease yourself into it and talk to people who know about the music. I was fortunate enough to have somebody help me because I was a musician playing rock and funk and all that.
Oh, before you got into jazz?
Yeah, jazz came much later. I had the big hair, medallions, and the whole thing. And so jazz was much later, but when I first heard jazz, it was like, I don't have a clue what's happening here. And then somebody sat me down and said, well, this is why the bass player does this. This is why the drums are doing this. This is why the piano player is doing this. So it gave me a better point of departure. You can do it without that guidance. You just have to have more patience.
More patience and want to explore things on your own. Let's listen to All Blues by Miles Davis from Kind of Blue. This is another one that you recommended for new listeners to kind of get into.
Absolutely. Nice. But you see what I mean? There's enough repetition. You have the marquee thing again with Coltrane and Bill Evans and Jimmy Cobb, Paul Chambers, Wynton Kelly. You have melody. You have harmony, written, arranged parts. You have high-level improvisation, but there's nothing overly aggressive. Has a very cool, soulful feel and vibe to it. So it's a great record to get into real straight-up jazz. And speaking of Miles Davis, this is Miles Davis's Kind of Blue. Don Cheadle has completed the movie, the biopic on Miles Davis, and it's fabulous. They're starting to screen it at film festivals, so keep an eye out for that.
Absolutely.
It's magnificent.
So, Jay, you've done several albums, and I have to tell you a story. I was driving through Raleigh, North Carolina, and I was listening to one of the student jazz stations from one of the colleges there. I don't remember which one at the moment, but it was so very cool to hear them introduce you and play your music, and because we know you and we love you. So, but to hear it in a whole different area, and to hear people talk about what a great jazz musician you are.
You know, the first time I ever heard my music on a station that wasn't local,
right?
Years ago, when I did my Obsession record, I had to fly out to California, and I was staying at this low budget, because I had no budget, hotel. And it was like the era where the TVs had the radios on them.
Yes,
you remember those?
Oh,
right?
yeah.
So I'm in this hotel room, right? And I had just checked in. I had a horrible flight getting out there. And I said, well, let me turn on the radio. So, and people say, well, where can you find jazz on the radio? I always say, just go to the left of the dial. On some public station, you're going to find jazz.
Yeah.
And I turned on, and at that time, I think it was K-Jazz at that time, the LA station. Mm-hmm. Soon as I turned it on, I still had my coat on. Soon as I turned that radio on, I found that station, they were playing a track from my Obsession record. That was the first time I had ever heard my music played outside. And it was like,
how did it feel?
I froze. I was like, it was like I was in a parallel universe all of a sudden. It's like I'm not home. I'm, thousands of miles from home, and here I am hearing my music on this cheap TV radio in this low budget hotel room. It was surreal, Barbara.
My God. Well, now because you've composed and you write music, your own music, and you've had several albums, where do you go in your head when you are thinking about a new album? How does that come about?
Well, I just completed my brand new album, 0 to 60, which is due to drop in February.
Okay.
And I'm offering members who pledge in, I have advanced copies. Imagine that. I just happen to have some advanced copies of my 0 to 60 record. And you know what? That was my #1 premium on my show.
Wow.
People are pledging for it. So now I have a few left. So if you want to call in and make a pledge of at least $120 to support Barbara, I give you some of these CDs as a thank you gift. But writing, I write from two ways. Either I get a melodic motif in my head, or I get a rhythmic motif, and then
it just pops in your head.
So yeah, and different things inspire your life experiences. I remember a conversation I was having with Justin Coughlin, and Justin and I were and we're riding. I was driving to a gig somewhere, and we were talking about composition. He asked me, how do you know what idea to take? How do you know if it's a good idea or not? And I thought about it. And I said, Justin, I think the way it works for me, if I'm still thinking and hearing that idea a week, 2, 3 weeks down the road, then
you know it's something that you need to
work with it, develop it, because then you have something there. Because a lot of times I'll get an idea, either melodically or rhythmically, and the next day I can't even remember what it was.
So that's not the one that you wanted to go with.
Right. Stevie Wonder used to carry a tape recorder around with him everywhere he went, and he'd get an idea, he would just hum it, and I do that sometimes too.
Really?
Yeah, I'll keep it in my car and just.
All right, Lisa's telling me we got about 8 minutes left in the show, and there's a couple more songs I want to hear. This one I thought was really interesting. Victor, you can cue up Straight No Chaser from the Bop Collection, but this is actually smooth jazz artists.
These are smooth jazz artists normally associated with smooth jazz, like Jeff Lorber and Everett Harp, Rick Braun, trumpeter, Chuck Loeb, guitar player, playing straight ahead jazz. and there's like this thing in the jazz community. Well, these guys can't play straight up jazz. A lot of them are great jazz players and came out of that background. They just decided they wanted to make more money.
Make more money. So there you go. Let's listen to Straight No Chaser. Yep.
Now, what's funny about this, even though these are smooth jazz artists, that smooth jazz will not touch this record.
Isn't that interesting?
Because it's a jazz record. It's a jazz
and they
record.
Will not play.
They will not play this record.
And it is hard to dance to that one.
but it's not hard to listen to.
No, it's not at all.
And what's interesting, Brian Bromberg is the bass player. Brian is more, Harvey Mason is the drummer, but this is a straight up legit jazz record. These guys are playing. I would have preferred to have heard Jeff playing an acoustic piano. Mm-hmm. But Chuck Loeb is probably the best jazz player on here, and the bass player Brian Bromberg, because Chuck came out of a jazz background. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting. Chuck and Jeff Lorber got together and said, I think Jeff had a kidney transplant, so there's this foundation, and the CD is done to raise money for this foundation. Unfortunately, I can't remember the name of the foundation, but they wanted to do an art record, but they don't come out in public playing this way.
Wow.
It's interesting. It's
very, very interesting. The difference between commerce and art.
Absolutely.
All right, we have one last one that we were talking about, melodic modern jazz. That's what you wrote down here.
Which one is it?
Lament by Chris Parker from Imaginary Cities. You want to set it up for us?
Chris Potter, this record is probably it's definitely heading for my top picks of the year. It might even end up being my top pick of the year. Chris Potter is one of the most amazing saxophonists, musicians playing today. And I've was fortunate and blessed to be able to play with Chris. His new record, Imaginary Cities, it features his band, but he also features a string quartet. Now, we were talking about composed jazz. You can hear the string quartet in the background, and he magnificently merged these concepts with his band, the bass, drums, piano, with the string quartet. And it's beautifully melodic. Chris's tone with his saxophone, it's big, it's huge, but it's sensual, it's exotic, and the writing is so beautifully introspective and melodic and lyrical. And now this starts off like this, but then the band comes in, and it's one of my favorite
one of your
records.
favorite ones. Let's listen.
So you can see what I mean.
It's beautiful.
And then there's the improvisation is magnificent. It's just it's a beautifully conceived record. Highly recommend.
So in the last 3 minutes or so that we have on the show today, is there one album that every jazz enthusiast must have in their collection? And don't say Sinnett In Session.
Somebody asked me the other day if I was on a desert island, which record would I have? I'd probably take Coltrane's "The Love Supreme."
Because
it's the most emotionally powerful record I've ever heard, hands down, truly. Now it's not for the newbie into jazz.
Okay,
that's an intense record, but it's the most emotionally powerful record that I've ever heard in my life. Wow. Truly.
And for a newbie, what would be a must-have?
For straight up jazz, Kind of Blue.
Kind of Blue,
Miles Davis. Yeah, I would, because it's a very accessible record. Great band, great songs with they're accessible. They're not going to scare you away with overly aggressive performances, something like that. So it's a great record. So call in.
Absolutely.
Pledge
Call
for this
in
show,
and pledge.
Folks. Pledge.
Oh, guess what? We raised, are you ready? Drum roll. $5,473. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Another View
yes,
listeners.
Ma'am.
That is so very, very cool. $5,473.
We're not done yet.
And we're not done yet. Now, that's
5 minutes
including our
left.
$1,500 challenge. So we are really working it. You can still give us a call.
Call us now. and remember the CD. I'll give you a copy of the CD. You pledge in 0 to 60. You can't find it anywhere else. 889-9476. Anything to support the program, come on in. Call Support Public Radio. Do your parts, folks. 889-9476. We have about 4 minutes left in the show. We're coming up with a different program at 1 o'clock. Barbara, it's been...
We've got 1 minute left before the end of the show. I got you, Lisa.
And been a pleasure being here.
Thank you. And for those who are newbies who may be listening to this show today who have not had a chance to check out your show, tell us when it's on. Tell us when we can catch it.
My jazz show, Monday through Thursday nights, 9 until 1, Sunday afternoons, 1 until 5. If you're an insomniac, Saturday mornings from 1 until 6. I say that jokingly. And I host the R&B Chronicles as well on Friday nights at 7 o'clock.
Okay. And Jay, thank you so very much.
Barbara.
We appreciate it. And we'll be right back.
I'm with Marcellus, and you all are checking out Another View on WHRV 89.5. Don't go anywhere. Check us out.
So producer Lisa Godley, audio engineer Victor Bowen, and I are so very grateful for those of you who support Another View, not only by listening, but by becoming a member. So there still is time. Call 889-9476 and tell the volunteer how much you love Another View. We thank you so much, and we thank you so much for helping us meet our challenge today. There are so many ways to experience this show and all of our shows. You can go to anotherviewradio.org and download the podcast. You can go to YouTube, click on the WHRO channel, and then Another View to watch the radio show. You can always stream us live on Fridays at noon on our website, anotherviewradio.org. We're on Facebook at Another View Radio Show, and I'm on Twitter at Barbara Ham Lee. Next week, something new we're going to try on Another View. We're calling it Claville on Politics. And Professor Eric Claville from Hampton University will join me along with some special guests to help you understand what's at stake during this year's election. Our theme music was composed and performed by our very own Jae Sinnett. Lisa Godley is our show producer. Victor Bowen is our audio engineer. And Kamaria Mason answered our phones. I'm Barbara Ham Lee. Thank you again, everyone, for your support of Another View, and make it a fabulous weekend. We'll see you again next Friday at noon for Another View.